Hi, how are you?
Hi, Zibby. How are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm good. I'm happy to be here. I have to have my coffee because it's a little earlier in California.
Oh, I'm
I
sorry. I
hope that's
know this.
okay.
I've run up against this before. When I originally started this, well, first of all, I never imagined I would still be doing this now. I thought this would be like 2 weeks, we're all going to be home.
Of course.
But I would have made it later for the West Coast, and I wouldn't have made it at the exact same time my daughter has school. But you know what? These things happen. So,
These are the mom challenges. Well, I've been watching these interviews you're doing. It's such a comfort. It's been so great. So thank you for everything you're doing for writers who are adjusting to this new reality.
no problem. It's helping me adjust as well.
Good. Good.
Gives me something to do. When
Hmm.
I'm kidding. I mean, but yes, I really enjoy it, and I'm delighted to get to talk to people
Me too.
who it would have been hard to talk to everybody all over the
I
world. I
know,
mean,
that's the one. That's like a silver lining. It's been wild that we can just. I had my virtual launch event the other night, and all of my East Coast people, my family and my closest friends, and my West Coast people were all like in the room together. It was so great. I loved it.
that's so nice.
Yeah,
Maybe some of these ways of congregating will stay. You know, these.
I think so. I mean, I think one of my friends said to me after that, you know, I said I really felt so loved and supported that night, and she said nobody's doing anything they don't want to do right now. So when people are choosing to do something, they mean it, you know? And I
That's
was
true.
thinking, wow, I wonder if maybe we don't ever have to go back to not meaning it. That would be good.
And a lot of these things I think are working out very nicely online. You know, because
I think so.
half of life is like racing around from place to place, and this is great.
I
I,
know. It's easy.
it's easy. It's easy.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
well, your book, by the way. So I've been doing a lot of my reading these days because books aren't being sent fast enough and all the rest of it on the Kindle app for iCloud. So
Yeah.
like on my computer, and I don't know if I'm getting old or what, but I now have it all on like 200%. So all the words,
I do that too.
like it's so embarrassing. Even Microsoft Word is 200%. So I had it like plastered all over my giant like desktop, and my daughter was sitting in my lap like doing her drawing for school, and I'm like going through the pages and every other word is like, I'm like, oh my, and she can read, so I was like, don't look up, don't look up, don't see this.
That's how I feel about my own children. I'm like, they can admire the pretty cover of my book, but they may not open it for a
Yeah,
long
like
time.
from the beginning it's intense and gritty, and oh my gosh. So
It is. It
yeah.
is.
Well, tell me about, well, first of all, for anybody who might not know about it, do you have a copy of
Of
your book?
course. I have this. It
Oh,
came
it's so
out
beautiful.
2 days ago. It's such a luscious item.
I love it. I just
Yeah, I
love
love
it.
it too. It's yummy. I mean, I love the cover, but something about this in hardcover is like I can't stop picking it up, and it's like a baby.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
congratulations on
Thank
the
you.
recent release. So
Thank
exciting.
you. Yeah, it's really
Um,
cool.
so tell us what it's about, and it's super personal and emotional and all the rest. But
It is really personal and emotional. It's a memoir. It's sort of laced with cultural history, and it's meant to be sort of the first literary memoir about codependency. So I grew up in a household with a family member who struggled with addiction. My sister struggled with heroin addiction when we were teenagers and in our 20s, and made it out and is a complete badass and my hero. And I that experience really colored all of my relationships and just the way I related to the idea of love and sacrifice and what you're supposed to sort of do in relation to other people and take care of them. And I really thrived on sort of feeling needed and was really enlivened by feeling needed in that dynamic. And and then it's about how that, largely how that played out in my romantic relationships, subsequent relationships. So I had an affair when I was married and a young mother with an ex-boyfriend who was a hardcore drug addict who was in and out of sobriety for many years, and we were madly, desperately in love. But it's a lot about, it is very gritty and it's very intense because it's about addiction, and I know a lot of people don't have personal experience with that kind of hardcore addiction. But it's also sort of broadly about expectations that women place on ourselves and that throughout history that are, have been placed upon us culturally, and sort of how much of ourselves to give in love, whether it's you know, in any kind of relationship, in motherhood, in our family relationships. So hopefully it, you know, has like broader reach beyond just those who enjoy a good gritty addiction memoir. But I always was reading addiction memoirs my whole life, and I never understood why none were written by people who lived in those households and suffered through that. It's terrible, and it's really confusing, and it can really skew everything in your life and be it's just incredibly challenging. And there are resources out there for people who have that experience, but I always was looking for, like, I wanted this book, so I had to write it.
I love that. I mean, that's the best reason to write a book is when you can't find what you're looking for and you have something so
Exactly.
unique to say. I mean, it's great. And I'm like you, I love addiction memoirs. I always feel kind of bad saying that.
No, I mean, as a genre, especially I think in like the last 20 years, as women have started writing their own, I mean, I think it was a very male dominated genre for a while, but they're stunning. And they are sort of like, they encapsulate a kind of personal development narrative often that I think like a lot of us are after making those changes in our lives, whether or not we have struggle with addiction. They are these sort of salvation stories. I love them.
Yeah, you're so right. And so always just so open and personal and like
Yes.
dark, but then, there's some sort of light at the end because they've written this book and I don't know.
Exactly. No, totally. I know. And I kind of worried that I would, I don't know. I thought maybe I wouldn't have to share as much of my own struggle. I was like, well, I'm going to write about other people's problems. And then I realized if I'm going to write this, I have to like really go for it with my own, be really, really honest, which I was. It was
Yeah.
cathartic.
Yeah, how does it feel now that this is in the world? Is there like any random school teacher or somebody out there that you're like, oh my gosh, this person's gonna see what I have to say?
um, It's funny. I keep saying, I said this at my launch event too. I had a mom friend ask me, like, how do you feel knowing that people are going to be able to read this? And I said, I feel so relieved that I never have to pretend to be normal again. So in a lot of ways, I mean, I think it's only okay, and I only feel comfortable sharing this because my life has been really transformed by recovery and therapy and all the work I've done on myself, and to be able to write this. So I talk about these things now with like a certain degree of detachment. But yeah, there are definitely people who have reached out to me to say, congrats on your book. I'm so excited to read it. And I'm kind of like, I want to just sort of like warn them that it's heavy. But I also feel like all lives have heaviness, and there are people who choose to share about it and those who don't. And it feels surprisingly healing to just choose to just like, this is my truth. What can I do? You know,
That's amazing. And
feels good.
think about all the people you're gonna help by doing that. I
I
mean,
hope
by putting
so.
yourself out there. Oh my
I
gosh.
do hope so. Yeah, I mean, I was always so ashamed of some of these things and really sort of confused as to why I was making certain choices in my life. And I wish I had had more to read that made me feel like, this stuff happens. It's normal. This is like, it really is part and parcel of living with this disease of addiction. There, I talk about it in the book, but codependents used to be called co-alcoholics because the dynamic was thought of as a two-person dyad, and so one person's alcoholism expresses itself in this particular form of drinking too much, and the other person's alcoholism expresses itself in all of these martyring, controlling, manipulative behaviors and rage, and so I hope that I can sort of normalize that this is how this family disease expresses itself in other people.
You had some great line, which I'm probably going to get wrong, but it was something like when you were talking about the disease of addiction, you said your disease was love,
Yes. Yeah.
right? Which
Yeah.
was so beautiful. I mean, it's true. So you just kept like putting yourself out there and opening up and like getting so enmeshed and all the rest. And
Yes. Yeah. And
yeah,
I think that, among especially the women I'm close to in my life, those questions of how, like, how to have boundaries in love and where sorry,
No, that's okay.
I think are very, those questions are always like present in all of our relationships. And so, yeah, I say that the disease I had was loving him, this particular partner, which is definitely true.
How long did it take you to write the book?
It took me, once I had this idea, I did about 6 months of research before I wrote the proposal, and then the writing of the book was a year and a half. And during that time, that was, besides raising my children, that was all I was doing, and it was really intense.
I bet. I mean,
Yeah.
how many days did you end up crying at the
Oh
end
my
of it?
God. I mean, it was so funny because I feel like I was kind of researching like my own misery. You know, I mean, I was a researcher of my own depression. So I was like going back through. I've always kept journals and really like pretty diligently. It was like back through so many journals and letters and emails and of really the hardest times in my life. So when I needed a break from those, I'm like trained as an academic, and there's some like history in here and not nearly as much. I mean, I think I wrote like a history book while I was writing this. But I would take a break and throw myself into this sort of historical research about the temperance movement and Al-Anon and how women have sort of historically related to alcoholics and addicts in their lives. That was my break. That was my
That was your
vacation.
break. Yeah, it sounds like a real dreamy,
Yeah, exactly. But it was fascinating. It's really fascinating. I hope that, I don't know, I think I'll write something about some of that history that didn't make it into the book because it was so interesting.
How did you go from that intensity of emotion to then like dealing with your kids? How old were they at the time of writing? And
They're now 11 and 8, so this was like the past couple years that I've been writing the book. And
how did you just switch the trigger? I mean,
it's funny. It's like, I mean, I don't think I switched the trigger. I think I mean, as you know, it's like you just are sort of called upon to be another version of yourself, which is why they are such a life-saving, amazing. I mean, they're great and they're so funny. And I found that I was really worried that I would sort of like carry this sad bummer mom energy like into the evening or something. And then they would come home from school and I would just, they make you feel great. I felt really just lucky to have my real life was playing out and reminding me every day that like we're all happy and okay and healthy, and that just kept me very like grateful that I had the sort of space to write this.
oh, I'm losing you again. Yeah, I feel like there's this extra huge pressure on moms to like have it all sort of, you have to present as somewhat together, and yet I feel
Yes,
like kids can always see through, like kids can see through me a mile away when I'm like pretending that I'm
totally.
in a good mood. They're like,
Yes,
no, why are you so
yes.
sad? And I'm like, how can you tell? Like,
They
and then
always
they're like,
know.
you being sad is making me sad. So then I feel even
Yes.
worse, Now I'm sad and I've made my kid sad. It's
Yeah.
like a no win. It's like I just can't. I just can't.
I
But
know what you
yeah.
mean.
Anyway, so to have undertaken a project like yours in the midst of it all, and I'm super impressed.
Thank you. It was really cathartic. It was really, it was, I had heard people say that about writing books before, that it, like something sort of like needed to come out of them in a particular way at a particular time. And I feel grateful that I think I was sort of like struck by that bolt of lightning. This just all just arrived, it had to happen in this way. And I'm so glad that I had my kids there to sort of like provide this light, all the way through.
Do you have advice if people are listening or listening later who are struggling with somebody in their life who's going through this, or have recovered? Or I know there are sites like We Connect and all these like great resources for
Yes.
people, but do you have any specific advice or advice on the writing process itself?
Um, I mean, I have really been thinking a lot about people who are trapped in these kinds of dynamics right now and who are living in households with active addiction right now. I just think it must be so hard to be dealing with that with all of these restrictions on our movements. And to those people, I say, like, there are resources out there. We Connect is a good one, and Al-Anon has really been like a powerful community for me. There are, I mean, I think the key is finding other people who understand, because I think that we can, access websites and like read guidelines and self-help bulleted lists or something, but really finding people, connecting with people who understand exactly what you're going through is the most powerful thing there is. And my only writing advice ever is to read. That's all I ever want to do. But reading is it's all in there. You just have to read books.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. I love your show. I'm so glad I got to come on, and I'm so happy, and I can't wait to like listen to all the rest of your author interviews. They're like so fantastic.
Thank you. That's really
Yeah,
nice.
I love it.
Thank you. That's awesome. Thanks so much. Okay.
Thank you.
Take
Take care,
care.
Zibby.
Bye-bye.
Bye.